So a slight change of plans. I went ahead and grabbed the marine version of the amplifiers. Basically the only difference is they're silver and they're conformal coated. I just felt this might be a better idea. This is the 501 and they come with birth certificates, and this one will give us a 522 watts. And then the 4-channel is going to give us 625 watts. Now, one of the cool things about these amplifiers is that there's all this talk about like DD1s and fun stuff like that, distortion detectors. These actually have them built into it. That's what this disc is here. And then these instructions here at the end actually will walk you through how to use them. It makes setting these up super easy as far as figuring out where the radio is going to clip them at. So once we get to the end of the video, we'll show you how that all works. Now these amplifiers have a plug systems. On the highest amplifier, these are your speaker outputs here, and then they have the RCAs here. These amplifiers will take high level or low level, and by doing that you simply will cut off the RCA section and you can run voltage into the amplifier. Or if you're going to be doing line level, you can just leave these on and attach to them. You can also cut these off and lengthen these to any length you want, which is what we're going to be doing. Because of where I'm going to put these, I want these to be about 3 or 4 feet longer. I'm not a big fan of having all these bundles just kind of all in the same spot. It doesn't look all that pretty, so I like to stagger my RCA inputs. Now as far as the sub amplifier goes, it has a speaker plug here on the end of the amplifier along with the power, ground, and remote plug. These take an 8-gauge input. Because it doesn't have the Boston acoustic stereo in it, I happen to have my amplifier sitting right here. And the reason why I want that is because I want to get the measurements for length and also these feet, because I'm going to make a panel that mimics this and is going to slide into place and lock in, and then we're going to build off of that for this mount. And for that we're going to use some 1/8" ABS for the base. We're going to put a 1-inch spacer in there along with a 1/2" panel or a 1/4 inch, I'm not sure yet, for these to mount on. They're going to sit just like you're seeing here with all the adjustments towards the inside of the car where we can fold back that panel and easily get to them. This is also where the signal input is on this side, which is good because I want to be able to run my power out on the driver's side and I want to keep my signal out over on the passenger side, mainly because the big giant power wire for the car runs up into that side and loops up the center console. I don't want my signal anywhere near that big fat power lead. Let's get started. Alright, let's head over to the router and router out this shape. Alright, so we have our basic shape all set and ready to go. Now we can build off of this our mount. Now what we need to do is we need to make risers that come off of this about 1 inch. The other thing too is that I just test fit it. Whoever put that goo in the car, if that's your job, slow it down, man. I mean, it's like some kid just went in there with a tube of toothpaste and just squeezed it everywhere. It's like, come on, seriously? I'm sure there's a regulation somewhere that says only put this much, and putting any more is kind of pointless. I'm gonna grab some thick stuff. Now, because I don't like a lot of holes in my plastic as far as test fitting and stuff goes, what we like to do is use some double-sided tape, so when we're mocking something up, we can just stick it together, and then if we need to, we can pull it off without drilling a bunch of holes. And then when we're done, we can go ahead and screw the whole thing together. So looking at the way our amplifiers are going to be mounted, there's not going to be any big wires that are going to be having to come from one side to the other. Power is going to be on this side, signal on that side. The bass knob will have to loop under, and so will the remote turn on, but we're going to have this big channel here, so those small wires, we're not going to have any issues with it. So really all we need is something that is exactly this tall. Then we want to go a little wider so that we have something to screw our wires down to. So we're going to start with 8 1/4 by 12, and then we'll make adjustments from there. Now the other nice thing about using double-sided tape like this is we can put the double-sided tape on, and like this, we're going to go mount this in the car. We could stick this panel on and have it be right where it needs to go in the car, and then we can pull it out. This stuff sticks really well. So let's go ahead into the car and see if this panel fits. Look at that, it's great. So there's an indentation right here that I wanted to make sure that this front edge came up to, so I could get the most amount of room this way. Now we'll go ahead and take this back out, drill all our pilot holes, counter flush, round this thing over, and get it finished up and start mounting the amplifiers to it. So for this, we went ahead and pre-drilled our holes, and we used a countersink bit here to notch it. We're gonna use some tapered screws on this, and then I'm gonna put some foam on the back of this because I don't want this rattling back there at all. So as you can see, everything is nice and flush. Now, if you don't have any foam laying around, another nice thing to use is the soft side of Velcro. Now, when you're putting screws on both sides of a mount like we are, make sure you don't drill holes in the same spot on both sides. Believe it or not, it's real easy to do. In my mind, I'm always strategically looking at the same spots, so I have to teach myself to move over just a little bit more than what I think would be perfectly center, because I've done it where I've actually perfectly lined up 2 screws on top of each other. Alright, we have our mount made. I'm going to do one last test fitting just to make sure that this stuff didn't get in the way of anything, and then we'll start wiring up our amplifiers. So everything fit good so far. Now it's time to get the amplifiers mounted to the bracket. We're going to put the sub amplifier on top so that the heat that this is going to create, because my guess is this one's going to be working the most, because I mean, you know, everyone wants a ton of bass. We don't want the heat from this, you know, if we mount it like this, then all that heat is going to transfer through the highs amp. So we'll go ahead and put it on top, that way it will rise up and do its own thing. We also know that this needs to be flush here with the bottom. We do have that gap here on the top that we can use, because this hangs over just a slight bit, which is fine. We want to keep in mind that the power plugs are going to stick out here, so we want to off-center it so that this is more that way, because these are just plugs that plug in. They're not big RCAs or anything like that, and they're going to be channeled out and down. So we'll go ahead and line these up and screw them in place. Now, just like before, we'll go ahead and test fit them, make sure the panel closes over them. Yay! Alright, so it fits good. This panel goes on with no problems. The idea is to make our wiring come down. There's an area here. We're going to run across the back here. I'm going to test fit the spare tire just to make sure that that will work and it clears it. Otherwise, I'll come across this area through here. And then the power wire is going to come up and back around. So I have a little bit more testing to do. But otherwise, I'll meet you on the bench and we'll get this bad boy wired up. Alright, so after doing some test fitting with the tire in and all the panels and whatnot to figure out how the heck I'm going to run my wires across the back here. When the tire goes in, there is room here on the bottom. However, it's not guaranteed, meaning if the tire shifts, it will smack into the back. So for the most part, it rests up against that. I don't want to put my wires between the tire and whatnot and then have it shift and smash. So that's out. The way this panel rides, naturally you'd like to go for corners. There's really no corner. So what we end up with is this right here. What I did is I went ahead and taped a piece of 4 gauge into place to be like a mock piece of wire to get an idea of what we're dealing with. There's a spot here and there's a spot here that the wire can come out, and this is essentially what we're running. I mean, it's not going to be real thick anyways, because it's just a piece of speed wire and then some flat RCA wiring that we're going to do, but this is where it's going to have to go. I've test fit it, it works good. We're just going to obviously put some more connection points on here to make sure that this doesn't roll down or anything, and of course it's not getting pinched, which is great because there's really nothing on the back of that panel. It's just an open air chamber. So now we have a plan as far as wire management goes. And of course we have plenty of room for the power wire on that side. It's just a matter of getting the right length of wire. Now we can finally get to the bench and start wiring this thing up. So what I like to do when I'm getting ready to start on the amp rack is kind of get everything that I'm gonna need around me. So I have my power and ground wire. I've gone ahead and seen where these are all gonna plug in and figured out that, oh yeah, we have the speaker wires that are also gonna need to go back that way. So they're gonna run up along this area here. I have all my RCA connectors and I'm gonna add on to these after I remove them because I'm not gonna be reusing their connectors. I have my power plugs all set and ready to go. Now I've kind of stared at it for a minute or two, just going over it in my head to figure out, okay, where does everything need to go? Do I need to drill any holes through the board? And I've decided that I'm gonna drill a hole here to route these wires through so they can come up the back and across here, because all the wires are gonna need to come out right here. And then the power wire is gonna come out here across the bottom. Other thing we wanna do too is go ahead and flick these dip switches while we're thinking about it. So first things first, input level. We want to go ahead and turn that all the way down. We want to turn our bass EQ all the way down. We want to make sure it's on 4-channel and not 2-channel. We're going to go ahead and set this to high pass, and we're going to go ahead and turn it to our default 80 Hertz. Come up here to the top amplifier, gain all the way down, bass EQ all the way down. Go ahead and set it to 80 Hertz. Now it's set to 250, so make sure you do a full rotation on this. And then it is low level, so that switch is set up properly. On the side of this amplifier, it has one other switch here, which is if we're going to be using the remote bass knob on and off. Since we're doing an Epicenter, we're not going to be using the bass knob here. We also have subwoofer volume control built into the head unit. So now we can go ahead amp rack is done and all set and wired up. So what we did is we made up our own RCAs and we taped them as thin as possible, meaning so when this goes across the back of the car, it's going to be nice and flat. So there's 6 RCAs up underneath this. We have our speed wire, and on this side we have our 2 8-gauge, both power and ground, as well as our subwoofer wire. And then we finished off the end of it here with some nice ferrules so that they'll go into the speaker cup and be good. Everything is locked into place. Speaker wires are ran across the back here, all zip tied nice and tight. So now we can go ahead and slide this into the car. So all we need to do now is get a bolt for this, and we can tighten that up with a washer. Alright, she's all mounted in place, nice and secure. Now what we need to do is get these wires going across here, and then we have to make a mount for the Epicenter on the other side. We also need, of course, to run the wires, but one step at a time. So for the Epicenter in the opposite corner, what we've done is basically the same as before, but we don't have to come out quite so far. We have a 1/2-inch back piece. There's 3 bolts that are sticking out in the car, so essentially what we've done is we've cut a square, we've pushed it into those bolts, which then makes an indentation in our plastic, and we've drilled those holes. Now this will slide right on. We needed another 1/2 inch piece to clear those bolts, and then we've gone ahead and put a 1/4 inch ABS on top of that. Now we'll be able to get a screw in this bolt right here. These are really tight, like we have to pry this off. So this will hold in there nice and secure. Now what we need to do is go ahead and mount our Epicenter onto it, just like this. And then for the most part, this is done. We just have a power, ground, and accessory they're gonna run up with the base knob, and our RCAs are gonna plug in here. So let's screw this thing down real quick, and then we'll hop in the car and we'll plug everything in. Just like that. Let's go ahead and put a bolt right here. Alright, she's in place. All we have to do is plug in our RCAs and our power cable. And of course, the one thing we don't want to forget, which makes the Epicenter all that fun, is the control knob. Now all we need to do is plug in our other RCAs. We haven't zip tied these up yet. We're just gonna plug these in for right now, just so we can get the length right. And then when we're done, we're gonna go back and add some heat shrink over these ends so that they're nice and insulated. That way nothing can accidentally get in there and touch them. What we need to do now is crawl in the trunk and go ahead and zip tie all these wires on both sides up into place running forward.